All right, welcome to the podcast.
Hello.
Uh, as far as earliest childhood memories, what are we getting into as a kid?
Earliest childhood memories for me?
Yes.
Um, I have a lot of memories of being, like, really young with my siblings in, the house that I grew up in up before 3rd grade that was really, like, playful and light and fun,
Mhm.
and so 3rd grade is, like, what age? Like, maybe, like, 7?
I'll give it to
Take
you. Yeah.
Yeah, so, like, earlier than that, like, I remember running around my bedroom. I had bunk beds, I shared a room with my sister, my brother's room was next door, we were always crazy, like, running around in between. My dad, like, with us being goofy, um, playing outside with our dog, Barkley, he was the best, a yellow lab, like, very, like, you know, fun, light
Yeah.
childhood is, like, the beginning of what I remember, yeah.
So when we get to like elementary or middle school, what does are we excited about school? Are we just happy to hang out with friends afterwards? What's going on?
Okay, middle school. Let's see. This is fun. I like these questions. I wasn't expecting to answer these. I love it. Um, okay. Middle school, so I remember being in so the school that I went to, I grew up in a town called Hyde Park, New York, which is where FDR, the president,
Okay.
Franklin Delano Roosevelt, his home was. So the middle school that I went to was a high school that was built, the building itself was built in and around the New Deal.
Okay.
So the building was historic, and which was really cool because it had this element of like really like um old and preserved and
Mhm.
very much like a, um, intentional, non-updated, it felt less industrial to me
Gotcha.
than some other schools that I've gone to. It felt like it had um, a little more character to it. Felt like this, like, classic movie out of the '50s, like, with a green chalkboard and, like, the desks and the whole thing, like, that's what my middle school experience felt like. So, the building itself was absolutely beautiful and, like, being in that environment to learn. I remember like my 6th grade class, um, just yeah, I don't know. It's like it's interesting. Like I can see myself in the room. I don't necessarily remember exactly any particular. I remember in 6th grade, I like thought I needed glasses and I didn't. And it was this whole thing of like, just like one of those like typical things. And yeah, I would say, like, middle school was, like, obviously an awkward stage of my life, just kinda figuring out, like, what's
Mhm.
really going on here. Um, and I wasn't bullied or anything. If anything, maybe I was a little bit, like, not so nice to kids, but not, like, mean and harassing, but I just have a strong personality, so it would be difficult to bully me.
Mhm. Well, it's funny because everyone I talk to, it's like, yeah, middle school, like it was kind of weird, it's kind of awkward. And then I'm looking back, it's like the kids that I always thought like knew what was going on or whatever. Everyone was feeling awkward in middle school. Or it's like
Yeah,
we're just doing it.
totally, totally.
As far as the school went, did you have a lot of kids in a class, or what did that look like?
I would say probably, like, 20 or 30 kids in a class.
Okay,
Yeah, like a full classroom, probably at least 25 kids,
okay,
rows of desks,
yeah.
4 or 5 across the classroom, 4 or 5 back. So, yeah, full classes.
Did you feel like the general education style worked well for you, or what was going on?
Um, I'm a nerd, like, I'm very intellectual, and so I always excelled in school. It was something that was easy for me. And part of the reason why I didn't necessarily know it at the time, but part of the reason why I excelled in it is because I challenged the beliefs that were like presented to me. So
Mhm,
I really had to kind of like look at them and say, huh, does that make sense of it in my own mind
right.
and create like look at it from many different angles and have this idea of like, well, is that true? Is that not true? And I have a capacity for a lot of information in my head,
Mm,
and my brain is pretty quick. So school was always, I would say, easy for me. It
mm.
wasn't something that was difficult for me to do well at all.
So it helps that you're actually interested in not specifically the topics, but just it all in general.
Oh yeah, I'm still like I right now in my life, fast forward to 33-year-old me,
Yeah,
one of the things I'm like most excited about in my life right now, I'm realizing is like I hadn't been doing any like new or different learning for a little while. So I started to really seek out some courses or things that like that I could take that would be something totally new.
yeah,
So I'm taking a class in feng shui right now, which like is cool and awesome, but I'm realizing one of the things that I've reflected to myself as taking that course is that wow, I actually really love learning something. I love the idea of like, oh wow, this is something I've never explored before. I'm always listening to podcasts and like consuming information in ways of what's relevant to me either in what I'm obsessed with, which is like health, wellness, and coaching,
mhm,
or the world, where the world's at. But I realize now taking this other course, I'm like, no, I actually just love learning. I love learning new things. I love taking in new information. I
yeah,
love seeing new perspectives. And when I get to do that, like I'm having a lot of fun.
mm,
So it makes sense, like thinking back on school, that it was something that I enjoyed.
yeah. When did you first realize that was something that you enjoyed, or like what was the first experience that you're like, hey, this is great?
I would say I don't think I learned to enjoy it until I was in college and I was studying things that I really wanted to study versus like a forced curriculum, you
Okay,
know? I would say I learned to really enjoy studying and being like I enjoyed and embraced my intellectual nature when I was in college studying philosophy. So
okay,
I went to school for engineering, which like quickly was not going to be the thing I was going to study. And then I made a left hand switch and I just really fell in love with philosophy. So I started taking those classes and I had always been that. Again, it's like I realize it now. It's like I'd always been the one to really contemplate things from so many different angles and want
yeah,
to make sense of it and want to have long conversations debating different topics, like honestly like the best use of my brain and my like assertiveness would have been for me to be a lawyer, but I could never live I could not do that life. Like it would just drain so much out of me. But the idea of like looking at all the facts and then trying to discern what's correct and then make a case for it, and I'm so convicted in most of what I believe that it would, that a career like that would have suited me really well. But yeah, I would say the first time I really learned to enjoy it was when it was my choice. That it was like, oh, this is what I want to study. I'm very interested in this.
gotcha. So going back to when you were just getting it done, were you getting it done because your parents wanted you to have good grades, or you just prided yourself in good grades, or like even though you weren't loving it, how were you still able to do it?
I would say it's equal parts nature and nurture. Um, I think that my parents from a young age recognized that I was very smart and so that they celebrated it. And so it was a feedback loop. I remember my dad consistently talking to me about, he's like, you're so much sharper than the other kids. The other parents, talk about it and your teachers talk about it. And, it's easy, like, it's really easy for you to get good grades. Do you notice that it's more difficult for some of your friends? And I was like, oh, it's difficult for people. Like, it's very, so there's a very nature to me. Like it's very innate to me. Um, and I because it's innate to me, it was celebrated. So
Okay,
it wasn't necessarily there was, like, pressure put on me to do well. It was more that it was like, "Oh, well, she is doing well. Let's make sure this continues and, like, make sure that she realizes, like, what the benefits of this are," which is also kind of, like, a little bit screwed up in a sense because, like, it's like one of the other things I was really good at was art,
okay,
and that was not celebrated.
right.
That was, "Oh, that's not gonna get you anything. That's not gonna get you anywhere. Don't spend your time doing that."
Mhm.
So a different, thinking about it from that perspective too, like that's something I've totally embraced in my adult life, something that I love to do, something I do often. And yeah, that was bred out of me, even though I was excelling at that one too. It was like clearly prioritize math, science, writing, um, and more of the what would be deemed successful careers
Right.
versus being an artist or being a philosopher or being a writer. That was not encouraged for me, even though those were all things that I was loving.
As far as artist went, was it drawing? Was it sculpting? What was your medium? Was it all of them? What was going on?
So I love drawing and painting. for the most part. That was absolutely my spot. And one of my great grandmothers was an artist, a professional artist. So it was something that was in my family that people were like, "Oh yeah, well she's really great at this." And then my mom and my grandmother, that her it was her grandmother, my great grandmother on my maternal side. It was they were like, "Oh, well, it makes sense. She was an artist and she did these things." But that was so long ago. Like women now have so many more opportunities. Like, don't lean into that.
Mhm.
Or you'll never make money being that. You'll be a starving artist forever, et cetera, et cetera.
So at what age are you hearing, "Don't lean into that, you'll be a starving artist"? That seems pretty it seems
Yeah.
pretty young.
Pretty yeah, significant. I would say, like I going back to like what some of the earliest childhood memories and what I really liked to do as a kid was always arts and crafts.
Okay.
Like if you took me to do any sort of arts and crafts thing, like I was gonna love that. I was not the kid who wanted to go play sports as much.
Mhm.
I did like to play sport. Did like doing that. I just much preferred to have a coloring book or to be painting or to be I loved going to Michael's, the craft store. Like it was like, like kid in a candy store, like me and Michael's. And, I would say that in probably around the age of high school. So in high school is when art becomes elective, right? You no longer have to take it. It's something that you can take, but you don't have to take. And I like insisted. I took art all 4 years of high school.
Okay.
And that's when it was like, "Hey, maybe not. Like, you can still do this because you enjoy it, fine, but, like, don't let that be the thing that you're focusing on
Mhm.
over everything else." And so, yeah, I remember taking, my freshman and sophomore years of high school drawing and painting courses. I remember taking a 3D sculpture class in my senior year. I think I took, like a portraits and thing I even continued to take art into college as well too as electives because I went to a liberal arts school, so it was available to me, and it was something that, like, yeah, I was always like, "I'm picking this because that's what I wanna do with my time," but everybody else telling me like, "Oh, okay, well, it's cute that you're taking an art class," but
How dare you do something you want to do? That's wild.
yeah. Yeah, well,
When you're deciding on your courses for high school since they become electives, who's telling you, is it a guidance counselor saying, "Hey, maybe we lay off the art," or is it just the family members saying, "Let's"
It's my parents. Yeah,
okay.
it's my parents. Like, I don't think anybody in school discouraged me. I remember my art teachers in high school, and I remember really enjoying them and them enjoying me and encouraging me to continue to take the courses, right? Um, and it's like one of those things where when someone recognizes that you have talent in something,
Mhm.
they will encourage that you continue, but they don't have the bias that the family has, or they don't have the bias of the story of what's supposed to happen for you outside of the art studio. And so I remember getting in through, yeah, I remember it's just like, and not that to say that my family was discouraging me like strongly. It was just something that was like, hey, it's fine that you're doing that, but make sure that you're also getting good grades and everything else. Um, and I was also a high school and collegiate athlete. I competed in the sport of rowing, which is a really demanding, like, amount of effort, as far as, like, just, like, an overall, like, load of the sport. It's very challenging, and then, most of our practices were first thing in the morning before school. So, there was, on the list of priorities of things as far as my parents were concerned, it was get good grades, so that you can get into college, be really good at rowing so that you can get a scholarship for college. And then whatever you do in the art thing is like as long as it's like over here, that's fine. But don't, don't focus on that.
Absolutely. So, if you're looking back now, do you see a not necessarily a better way, but an alternative way to be not pushed, but to find more of those things that you enjoy? Because like obviously the school has counselors and things like that, but I spoke to mine like twice in 4 years, and I find it extremely difficult because the majority of what you hear from our parents is go to school, the college that's going to be super expensive, whatever job you'll get will get paid back tenfold because you're going to make so much money from going to college. I feel like that can't be the direction for everybody, but how have you seen or thought of a different direction that you would have liked to uh, not necessarily been pushed in, but at least been able to see.
Yeah, so, I love that we're having this conversation because this is one of the things that I'm, like, most passionate about in my life right now,
Mhm,
which is that I personally will not send my children to public school,
mhm,
not put them through that process of learning. It's not how I value, like, the education and the skills that I want to teach and instill in the next generation,
right.
and I want to homeschool my kids, or I want them to be part of a co-op. I want to teach them I want them outside in nature. I want them moving their bodies every day. I want them eating food that's, prepared by me or someone else that's all natural. I want them interested and curious with books and art and music rather than being attached to their screens.
Mhm,
Um, I want to see an entirely different way of educating our future generations than what the standard system is. And I believe that if we cultivate these, I mean, one of the other main things, the reason why I feel that strongly about it is because I want their minds to be pure and free. I
mhm,
do not want them indoctrinated by a system that is not supportive of the way that I currently live my life and the way that
right.
I like want to show up in the world. And so I want their minds to be open and resilient and creative and prosperous versus being told this is right or this is wrong or this is the way that this absolutely went infallibly. um a little bit different in the sense that like when I was really young and I was raised Catholic, and so I went to Catholic school for high school, and before that I was in public school. And in my younger years I would go to Sunday school, and that was the experience of like where it's like religion was being taught to me.
Yeah,
And again, my same, like, disruptor self was like, "Hey, I don't think that's right. Hey, doesn't sound quite right to me. Hey, I'm not sure about that." Debating and challenging and looking at things differently. And, and a lot of that, the critical thinking skills that have served me so well in my life and that have made me the woman that I am, I don't see schools teaching that in a
right.
way that aligns with how I want it to be nurtured and how I want it to be expanded upon.
For
So
sure.
to me, it's, I'm not over here to be like, "Hey, we need to completely revolutionize this entire system," because that's such a big overarching story that uh is difficult to chip away at. But for me personally, I want to revolutionize my system. I
Mhm,
want my system to be different, to be able to really build and cultivate the values that are important to me in my life, within my family, and within my community, and to
mhm,
do that with like-minded people. So part of a lot of the work that I'm doing now in my adult life. I'm single. I don't have children yet. I don't have a partner yet that I want to have children with.
yeah,
But I'm thinking about these things because I'm cultivating a community around me that can support me in that mission, right? um Building relationships with friends who value similar things to me. My views now as an adult are radically different than most of what I grew up with.
yeah,
And I don't necessarily like mean to like demonize what I grew up with. I'm like grateful for my story. I'm grateful for everything that I've experienced. It's just that I now have a very different view. I've always had a different view,
mhm,
and now I'm like my own independent adult that is convicted in my views because I've seen and experienced and because I've researched and because I have that like deep dive into understanding that to me that's what I want to see. And so I also realize like I could fall victim to a system that I didn't create and that I didn't design and that that I don't think produces the result that I want. Or I can say, "Hey, I want to create this is the experience I want my future generations to have, and how do I do that? How do I cultivate that for them? And how do I make that a possibility?" Rather than, being like, "Oh, well, this is just the way it is." Like I'm never going to be one to do that. So the idea of just being able to keep education in a system that really is aligned with my values and that can enhance the kid's natural ability, much like what I said about myself, like it's equal parts nature and nurture.
yeah,
It's like the nature piece has to be revealed first in my mind. So I want to see like what are my children interested in? What are they naturally talented in?
right.
Where do they gravitate towards? And then push them into exploring that and in a way that's like, hey, like whatever you pick is going to be valuable because now the job that I do and the work that I do has nothing to do with what I paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to go to college for. And that has not brought me success in my professional life. It has pieces of it has,
Yeah.
right? Pieces of it has brought me and has grown me and shaped me, but it wasn't this like direct thing of like go to school, get this degree, and then you will earn this money doing this thing. It's not that linear. And so I look at school as like, one of the other things I really like going back to the what I was talking about how for myself, like continuing my education and learning I look at it as school is not K through 12. Like school is not the thing that you start when you're 5 and you end when you're 18 or when you're 21 or whatever time you end college. School is your entire life.
Right.
School is every day. School is being out in the world and being open and curious. And so to me, building those critical thinking faculties and building a sense of identity in children is far more important than the algebra and the histories and all those things. Yes, they're going to learn that too,
Yeah.
but it's like building and recognizing their critical thinking skills and a strong sense of identity for them will set them up for far more success
Mm.
than than a K through 12 curriculum in my mind.
Oh, absolutely. And there's so many things that I haven't said unpack in a while, but that I would like to unpack there. One huge thing is, so my wife and I were planning on doing homeschooling as well, but I wasn't exactly a like quality student in school. I
Mm,
believe in fifth grade, I got a C in one class, and I'm like, oh my goodness, like I'm gonna get flunked, like I'm gonna have to stay in elementary school. And my mom's like, no, like you can get C's, like that's fine. And like at that point, then it was just like we're coasting. Like,
mhm,
hey, you want to go into the like elevated math class? And I'm like, not so much. But my wife, 4.0 her whole life. She went to Columbia, still 4.0, stuff like that. You obviously excelled at school. I've had a lot of people on the podcast that excelled in the general school system, but now they want to do homeschooling. So people can't just say, well, you didn't do well in school. That's why you don't want your daughter in school. So,
yeah,
first off, that makes me feel phenomenal.
yeah.
And then,
It's
like you
it's
said,
interesting though too, like to just like notice a little bit of a difference in men and women,
mm,
right? And so young girls and young boys, like girls are much more able to sit in a class and study
yeah,
in the age range of that. Young boys are not. They're supposed to be out playing. They have so much energy moving through their body. They cannot just sit there and be obedient. That's not what they're designed to do biologically. Like they need to be out getting their aggression out. They need to be doing martial arts. They need to be out in the woods playing. They need to be like, playing with dirt and just, getting not in real fights, but like roughhousing with each other and exhausting each other. Like that's what, it's different for men and women. And so like a lot of that too is like we're conforming this system to create factory workers, like
yeah,
respond to a bell and just comply and do what you're told versus like what our innate biology wants us to do. And
yeah,
so I do think it's interesting, like most of the time I have a similar, experience of like most of my female friends, like were able to do pretty well in school. And most of the most intelligent male friends that I have now as an adult were chaos in school. Chaos, like could not get good grades for for the life of them, like, causing all sorts of issues and problems, like, being labeled with issue like, creating issues of like what's going on. It's like, no, it's actually just completely against their biology. And it's really it's honestly shocking how many of my adult friends that are, in their 30s, 40s, 50s that are men that are brilliant that
mm.
say that they didn't survive in the school. Like they barely made it through school.
Yeah. I had an IEP where I could just leave class at any time and go walk around. I'm like, I don't know how I got this special treatment, but like this is great. So yeah, I think it's if I'm correct, our system is from the Persians schooling system, and I think they were the largest at the time. And we're like, hey, let's see how this works out. I don't think it was. I don't think it started off as, hey, we want factory workers. We just want everybody on the same page. And definitely back then, I don't think anybody was suspected to be different than one another. It was just like everybody can do the same
Yeah.
thing. Everybody can learn from the same option. We'll see how it goes. But I think this is episode 147, maybe getting close to 150. And I've easily had on like 30 or 40 people that have homeschooled. I never knew that many people in my life, but it's the numbers are
Yeah.
increasing. And they all said like college and life just seemed easier. Like when they would talk to their friends, they were more adjusted. And the thing that scares me the most, what you brought up about middle school was you didn't really know what was going on, and at that point we're learning from other people that don't know what's going on as well. So the chaos that can happen in a child's life without getting like good understanding or good direction or good boundaries, because we have 8 to 10 hours with these hormonal aliens that are just forming themselves as human beings.
Yeah.
I think that's where a lot of catastrophe happens for kids. Like
Yeah.
for me, I had a thyroid issue in I think I found out about it in middle school and like towards high school. So I was in the 95 percentile for height and weight for a long time. So like slender, whatever it was. And then my thyroid stopped working. And then at some point, I stopped growing tall, but kept on getting big because my body's like, this is what we're doing. And that has been something I had to battle for such a long time, because maybe a couple of kids made fat jokes, or I may have just internalized it because some one person said one thing and I didn't know how to communicate with anybody or whatever it was. And like that person didn't have any malintent, but we're just growing up, and but now we're the 20 years later, and that's still something that has been caught up with me. So I think the homeschooling thing can be extremely beneficial for those reasons, not just developmental increases in knowledge. It's just mental health as well, which is definitely not focused on in school.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a lot of this, like to touch on the idea of like where kids are potentially bullying each other or not even bullying, just, maybe it's more of just this natural, like poking fun at each other, like you would with your siblings. And it's not malintent, but it can be hurtful. The way I'm seeing um, that age range of children now be exposed to what I would consider to be over coddling and excessive um embellishment of like I'll say it the other way. They're not resilient to it.
Yes.
They're not resilient to the little bit of digs or pokes. They're not resilient to they have no grit to them. Like they're so soft because we have made everything acceptable and everything oversensitized in a lot of ways.
Mhm.
And I am all for inclusivity. I'm all for helping, like not necessarily singling people out and like helping people be able to celebrate their differences. And part of that, like, that's what I meant about talking about building strong identity for my children, is like, I want them to feel like they really know who they are,
Mhm.
and that comes from them, not from me, not from my partner, not from my community, like, it comes from them.
Mhm.
That that is what helps them build that resiliency and build that strength within them, because it's going to be something that, like, if then somebody does poke fun at you or makes fun of something, but you're solid in who you are, and like you're gonna have some elements of like sensitive nature, right? Like you're gonna I was also a little bit chubby growing up. I went through part of like what I would consider to be like the biggest transformation of my life in my 20s was after I gained weight and lost a significant amount of weight. And so I really relate to the things around our bodies, but it's also this thing of like, how can we help these kids become so like build their mental health to be mentally resilient, to also be emotionally resilient while still being connected to the feelings and sensations of what that is, right? Like being able to work through the emotions when that scenario happens and come back to that strength that they've built within their own identity. And, that's the best I mean, in my life, that's been the best skill that I've been able to hone, because the stronger and more certain that I am about me, like everything else gets easier.
Yeah.
I don't need to be like anybody else, and I don't need to like fit into a certain thing, but the more that I'm like completely solid in who I am, and that like that has to start when they're young. That has to start when they're young, not when they're, like, waiting until they're adults. It's like you have too much to unpack backwards, too much therapy, too much story work, too much, like, unlearning that has to happen. So it's like if you can get ahead of it and teach that to kids when they're young and develop it and hone it and show them that it's gonna change over the course of their life. Show them that their identity is gonna shift a little bit over the course of their lives. Like, things that were once important to them at one time may no longer be important later, and that is okay, and
Mhm.
that's, like, part of the process. And I think a lot of what I'm seeing now in these younger generations between friends, kids of mine, or what I'm seeing online, or just observing, young kids out in public. It's like I'm just like looking at them and I'm like, oh my god, like what's actually going on here? Is a little bit scary to me because they are so impressionable, because they are so emotional, because they are so like raging hormones experience. Like it's a very difficult, or it's a very different thing that like I want to see more I wanna see more resiliency in kids versus the super soft, super, like, like, over coddled nature that I'm seeing and experiencing now.
Yeah. Well, and I think the tough thing is I what I didn't realize as a young person, just because someone said hurtful words, that did not mean they were true. So yeah, yes, someone can use some words, but those don't get internalized unless you are using those words as well. So someone may call you fat, and then, we'll just say someone called that person fat next to you, and the person fat you just shrugs it off. And then somebody calls you fat and then you internalize it, the same exact thing happened, but it was dependent on what your reaction to it was. Like you could be like, "Oh, hey, that person was being mean," or it's just like that's what they said. Like it's not sticking with me. It is not. Those aren't my words. So once again, another thing like that would be extremely important to learn as a young child, but that's not something that our school system or just a lot of our community teaches these days. Um,
Yeah, well, a
but
lot of adults don't know how to do that,
it's
like, that's the thing is, like, we weren't taught that as kids, and as adults, we don't know how to do that, and so it's difficult. You can't model it because you
yeah,
don't know yourself.
mhm,
Um, and so that work of that's why, I think a lot of, um doing the work on yourself before having kids will make the parenting easier. And if that's not the scenario that you're in, like doing the work on yourself and letting your kids see it, like
mhm,
that is going to help them. It's never too late to do it. Like I'm looking at my parents who are, in their late 60s, early 70s, and I'm like, you guys, you're not too old to change. Don't tell me you're too old to change. You're not. Like it's more difficult for you to change now, but it's still possible. And I think a lot of that, always showing up for yourself first as a parent is going to do a lot for your kids, regardless of what age they are.
yeah. And we'll take a little bit of a turn, but you talked about rowing. How did
Mhm.
you get into rowing? Was this just on the erg, or were you on the water a bunch? Like, how did you get?
Yeah. So I grew up in the Hudson Valley of New York, and so the Hudson River is like one of the meccas of rowing.
Okay.
Uh, not like across the world, but like it's just like in the US, it's like a great place. It's very the sport there is a little historic. Like they've been doing it in the early 1900s, and just a really cool place to be outside and be in nature and doing a sport. And so I started when I was in middle school. Actually, I started going to like a rowing summer camp and really took to it and liked it. And it was like the first sport that I did that I actually was like, oh, I'm like, I get this. And I had tried cheerleading, I had tried softball, I had tried soccer, I had tried like what else? Like, I don't know, like none of those like seemed to be the thing.
Mhm,
For me, like it didn't click. Like I wasn't very agile for soccer. Like I'm not quick, like not working out. Cheerleading, I couldn't do a cartwheel. It didn't work out. Basketball, like I didn't have the hand-eye coordination. Softball, it just wasn't my like same thing. Like wasn't my thing. I didn't want to run to the bases. I didn't like couldn't hit a ball to save my life. And then with rowing, it was like, oh, here we go. Like this is actually something where like I have a lot of strength and power.
mhm,
Um, and I love being outside. I love being on the water. And this is a team sport. So it's like I have like people in a boat with me. And so I continued through high school and really just it like I have the right build for it. I had the right like brute strength for it in a way. Like it was like something that I was like, oh wow, I'm actually like I'm a strong female. Like I can this is something where like I can understand how to apply my effort here. And then um it became part of my identity in high school, you know? It was like the thing that I did and and I was relatively competitive at. So when I went to college, it was I almost didn't row in college. I had gone through the whole process of recruitment and applying to different schools and ultimately like I burnt myself out my senior year of high school and had a falling out with my coach and one of my teammates and it just like really was like one of those things where I was like, I don't want to do this anymore. And so when I went to college, it was like I didn't go to any of the schools that I had like a contingency of being on the team. I picked going to school was the only school that I had no obligation to row. Therefore no scholarship, no nothing, right? And it was like this thing of like, well, I don't have to do it. And then when I got to my freshman year of college, it was like I had lost this part of my identity that I didn't even really know was so essential to me. And the very first day that I got to campus, like the freshman orientation, like before everybody else gets there, one of the first people I see is the rowing coach. And he's like, hey, I remember you. Like, what happened? I thought you were coming here. Like, what's up?
Yeah.
Like this sassy British man. And basically just like stared at me and he was like, are you on the team or not? And I was like, okay, I'm on the team. And then I just, you know, decided to continue it. And it's like such a rowing is a really like is still to this day is like one of my favorite exercises and one of my favorite things. There's a lot of longevity in that as a sport and exercise because you
Yeah.
can still impact and it's like I mean the effectiveness of rowing is great because you're building strength and you're getting the cardio. There's an endorphins high that comes with it that is like unparalleled to me. Like I mean just it's phenomenal and um, the erg became something I enjoyed later in life because it was definitely not the thing that I liked and, while I was training and practicing, but eventually I started to once I got into health and fitness coaching, I was, very familiar with a boutique fitness called Row House,
Okay.
and I started taking classes there and going to studios there, and then eventually, I took a job to be general manager of one of the facilities,
Nice.
and so I did that for about a year, and then I continued to do coaching at Row House for a total of almost 3 years. So
Okay.
like, that was the phase of my life where I was like, actually figured out that the erg was not the bad guy, and that it was really fun and that I had this like whole new approach. I mean, Row House is fun. It's like you're blasting music, you got a light show, you got a whole room like energized with you. And so I that became like, going back to my first sport love, but in a whole new way. And so I've loved it. And the transformation that I've seen from people doing that as their primary form of exercise that otherwise like wouldn't feel comfortable in a gym or wouldn't feel welcomed in a group class or they're limited by different things in their body and they can't do any jumping or squatting or the impact type things and the rower is so inclusive and specifically row house is a great place for people to go and to get a great workout without anybody can do it. Literally anybody can do that class and
Yeah.
it can be modified to whatever skill level. And so it became this whole thing like that's one of my, the my coaching life after I, followed the whole path of go to college, get a job, work in corporate, and then I ditched that whole thing to go into health coaching and life coaching. And when I'm so passionate about these concepts, like where all this whole conversation, right, about the intellectual nature and the developing the person and the mental health that can't happen if you're physically unhealthy.
Mhm.
And to me, physical fitness and health around building strength and being, a vital human being is so critical. And so I love working with people at an entry level of that where it's super accessible rather than it being this more difficult, challenging type of fitness. And so Row House gave me that opportunity to pair up a sport that I knew really well and that I loved with meeting this demographic of clients that I really wanted to touch and lead and so I
Mhm.
was able to take them, and it's just 45-minute group fitness class, right? But it becomes this emotional thing. It
Yeah,
becomes this transformative journey that I'm getting stronger, I'm getting healthier, I'm getting fitter, I have more energy. And now I can look at those parts of me that need some help and love around the mental health and well-being and becoming a stronger person and contributing more to whatever the thing they're lit up is about. So it's a really, like, synergistic way of tying in so much of my life
yeah,
into that, and it's been really fun, and I don't do it anymore for teaching, but I still go to classes.
yeah. What was your favorite practice in college, while rowing?
I loved so rowing has, like, 2 different versions of the sport. You have spring and you have fall, and so in the fall, you do longer steady state races, 6Ks or beyond, and in the spring, you do shorter sprint races, which is like 2Ks, and
2K is
so
so long. So I'm a CrossFit background, and anything over 500, it's like, oh my god, what
You
is?
know yeah, but so here's the thing, this is why I love rowing so much, is because that machine will tax you in that way, but when you learn how to do a smooth application of power and you really maximize your recovery, it is an epic flow state. It is the best flow state. It's my favorite flow state. Like, it's something that is, a consistent feedback loop within the body. You have to focus on your breath. You have to engage your power. You've got to use your full body. You've got to lean into your core. There's the mind body connection that happens in it is unparalleled to me. Like, I just recently started taking Pilates classes and I'm like, I'm really loving this, like, because it gives me more range of
Mm,
my mind body connection and totally different positions and things. But I'm like, still it's not rowing. But the thing is, here's the thing, right? So, like, those longer 6Ks or, I don't know if there's, like, a necessarily a longer duration that you would do as a race in a regatta, but at least that I know, not that I did. Um, people, it's a different intensity. So a 6K might take you, like, like 20 minutes versus a 2K will take you 7 or 8.
mhm.
And so the difference is like you're going a little bit lower intensity or a little lower speed with a more consistent, like, 80-85% effort versus a 2K is 100% effort and 100% speed as quick as you can get it done.
Oh,
And
wow.
it's insane. It's insane. I've never done something more physically challenging than that.
Yeah, I did a rowathon once where usually it's with a group of people, and my buddy's like, "Hey, you want to do by yourself?" And I'm like, "No." And I'm like, that'll be a fun challenge. So I rode a marathon, and for the next like 2 3 weeks, my body's like, "Oh, you want to do things? No,
Oh, yeah.
we're
Oh,
we're
yeah.
done. We're done. We're done with you."
I've rode 2 half marathons, but I have not, like, separately,
Yeah,
but I would not put myself through a marathon row.
yeah. Well, if there wasn't like 30 other teams around and the music
Oh, yeah.
and my
Makes
wife
all the
showed up
difference.
halfway through and I was like, "Oh, this is fantastic." Like, you're rooting for me. And it's so hard because everyone is rowing at like 34 strokes per minute, and I'm here
Insanity.
hitting like 18 or 20. Like, I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna make it. I think it took like 3 hours and 18 minutes or something like
Yeah.
that. But yeah, no,
That's pretty decent time, 3 hours and 18 minutes, okay.
yeah, I wanna say I was averaging like a 2:15, 2:20, and I was
Yeah.
exclusively just training for this event for like maybe a month or 2, and I was never able to sit on there for longer than an hour. I was listening to
Yeah.
podcasts and stuff, and I would just hit like a mental wall, like throw off the headphones, like, "I'm done." Like, that's it. Like, I tried to hit a long ride, don't
Yeah.
make it. So I was like, "Let's see if we can make it an extra 2 hours.
Yeah.
We'll see how this goes."
Yeah, it's insane. Yeah, like, I mean, the erg is a totally different thing than being in a boat, and so, like, to answer your question, what my favorite practice was always the water practices where we got to do a lot of technique work because I loved technique work. Like, I love being really precise with my movements of my body. And rowing is a sport of physics. So if you gotta get your angles right, you gotta get your oar in the water at the right place, you gotta pull on it from the right depth, you gotta be able to pop it out quick so that the boat doesn't slow down. Like, so all that technical work was my favorite in long steady states. Long steady states. So the fall was usually a lot of the time we got to do that. I'm not a sprinter type person. I hate the 2K. I hated the spring season. Like, I hated the fall because it was cold, and I hated the spring because it was just, like, too hard.
Yeah. Every time I have someone that rode on here, it's like, yes, I have been on the water once in a solo, and it was with my buddy down in Texas. He rode at Purdue. He's like, yeah, let's get you out on a boat. You row all the time. And I didn't even get to the legs portion. It was just hips, arms, hips,
Yeah.
hips, arms. Did you guys fall in the water all the time, or how did you
Uh,
not like?
Not all the time, but it had happened a couple
Okay,
times. So rowing is either there's different types of boats. So the biggest boat is an 8-person boat with a coxswain, so 9 people in the boat. That boat is the most stable and the most difficult to flip over.
okay,
You've got 8 oars, you got 8 people, like, the likelihood of you falling out of that boat is very minimal.
okay,
Then the next boat you got down is a 4-person, boat with a coxswain, so 5 people, and those are pretty stable, but a little bit more like you might, with a
yeah,
few wrong moves and 2 people leaning in the wrong direction, you might go over. It hardly ever happens. Singles and doubles, there's a double and there's a pair, which is 2 different things. A pair is 1 oar on for each person, 2
okay,
oars, and then a double is, what they call sculling, which is 2 people with 2 oars each, so a total of
okay,
4 oars. And then you have a single, which would be just you with 2 oars.
yeah,
And, I would say that the smaller the boat, the more likely it is to flip,
mhm,
and the likelihood of you flipping is not I mean, it's gotta be like, okay, it happened to me one time in high school, and I don't think it ever happened beyond that. But I've seen it happen, like, maybe 1 or 2 other times,
okay,
but, like, it's not like, and you gotta think about this thing, like, I was in a boat every day for,
right,
like,
yeah,
8 years of my life. So, not every day, but most days, so, like, it's not that common. I don't know what that statistic is, but
yeah.
3 times I was like,
I almost racked up multiple flips. I was just like, he's like, you got to move because the wind was taking us away from where we were
yeah.
docking or whatever it's called. And he's like, you gotta start moving. I'm like, I don't want to. I don't.
And yeah, and that's the thing is it's actually the boat is more stable when it's the
Yes.
quicker it's moving. But yeah, it's a really graceful sport. It's a super
Mhm.
graceful sport. And like so that's why I love the technique work, because if you can really get that smooth, like there's just and again, it's like that flow state feeling on the erg, it's harder to feel in a boat. It's like you feel the oars go in, you feel the push, and then you come out and it's like, whoo, and it's just like that over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And I've had the opportunity to row in some really beautiful places. Like, it's just I would love to do it every day now as an adult. I would love to go out in a boat every day doing that.
Yeah. So you mentioned in college that you struggled a little bit with weight. What was that situation?
So towards the end of college for me, my junior year of college was when I turned 21.
Okay.
And I had been, like drinking and partying a little bit before that, like every college student does. But rowing taking up so much of my time and so much of my early morning time, like I wasn't the kid who was going out every single weekend until I turned 21, where it was like, I want to hang out with my friends. Like, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm exhausted, I'm burnt out, like I'm tired of this shit. Like I've been doing it for so long and this looks way more fun. Like I want to go to the bars, I want to drink, I want to go to parties, I want to flirt with boys. Like, it was this whole other life that was really appealing to me that I just didn't get the chance um to participate in a full send. And I'm looking at my friends around me that are all doing it. I'm like, okay, this is like I want to do what they're doing. And so what ended up happening was like I just really got frustrated with the athlete lifestyle and started to ditch that and go into partying every chance that I got. And so what that led to was like my performance going way down, um, gaining more weight, me, wanting to skip practices or figuring out any way in which I could get out of competing or, whatever it was. Like really just my priorities flipped, and like I can clearly see it as how burnt out I was. Like that rowing is a sport that demands so much. Because especially of collegiate athletes, right? Like you're already strapped on time, like you're doing a lot. You've got to be up early. You've got all these extra hours of things that other college students aren't doing. Like I was getting up at 5 a.m. for practice every day and going to bed at midnight, just like everybody else.
No.
And it's like just destroying. destroying my body. So my body's stressed out. And then the way I started coping with it was with drinking. So I can see the whole, I mean, to me now it's obvious I'm eating excessive amounts of food in a dining hall.
Yeah.
I'm not sleeping at all. I'm highly stressed. I'm binge drinking alcohol like 3 to 4 days a week. And before I knew it, it was like, oh my God, I've packed on all this weight. So my junior year of college, I would say, like, that's where it sort of started. By my senior year coming back, I decided I was like, "I'm not rowing again this year. Like, I'm not doing it. I gotta just let that part go, and focus on what's next for me after college." Which was really not like, it's like that's like the what was my logic, but really was like, no, I just want to enjoy my last year of school before I have to go be an adult. And so then the binge drinking continued and the all the things that go along with it, the late night food orders, the pizza, the just completely not taking care of myself and thinking still with the mindset of an athlete who's weight training and racking up meters on the rower every day, like thinking that I could eat those same way and
Mhm.
thinking that drinking and all that wasn't gonna affect me. By the time I graduated college, I was, like, the heaviest I'd ever been and just really, like, most people talk about built gaining the freshman 15 or freshman 20. It was like, no, that happened to me at the end. And then I was just really out of, a big identity shifts happening at this period of time, which was not being an athlete anymore, graduating from college. I moved to New York City to take my first job, as an adult, and I was I went to college in Connecticut, and I grew up in the Hudson Valley, so the tri-state area, going to New York made perfect sense, and I had friends that were there that I went to college with and people that I knew, but I didn't have like good friends. I didn't have my people with me. And so just like going through that transition of what the hell, like what is this world and trying to connect with people in New York over the party culture again, right? So it was going out for happy hours, going out to dinners, eating takeout, eating every food under the sun. And by the time that I was like, 20, let's see, I graduated college when I was 22. By the time I was like 24, 25, like I was the heaviest I'd ever been. Um, and so uncomfortable in my body, so dissociated from anything that would like make me happy. I was so in the rat race of this story of like,
Mhm.
well, I have to keep going and working because I have these student loans and I live in New York City, so everything's expensive, but my salary here is higher than my friends who work in other places, not understanding like cost of living and like all the other factors, right? So I was very much in this place where I'm overspending, like, I'm living outside of my means in New York, and the overspending is on alcohol and partying, and, like, I'm like, "What the hell is going on here?" And I'm so just, like, not happy in my body,
Yeah.
and that's when I reconnected to fitness, and so I started to like, I just kinda hit this wall where it was like, "I have to change. I have to do something different, like, I can't be this person anymore, like, I'm so unhappy."
Do you
And
feel like there was a day one? Do you like was there a couple false starts? Was it a hey, I'm just gonna start. I don't have to be perfect. Like walk me through that.
there were definite false starts.
Mm.
The benefit that I had of my first job in corporate that I worked at for 6 years before going into health coaching was that I made great friends there.
Okay.
So, like, I had a couple girls in the office with me that were into health and fitness and things, and, like, they were kind of like, "Hey, let's go to a spin class. Hey, come with me to a yoga class." Like, "Hey, let's go on a walk at lunch." And like I was having trouble just getting around, right? In New York, I walked most places or I was taking the subway. I'm going up and down subway steps. I'm out of breath. Like I was probably like my heaviest weight was probably like 250 pounds. I'm
Yeah.
5'7". So, it's pretty like quite large, like of a human. And to be in an active city, it's difficult to just, you walk up and down the stairs and you're sweating. It's like you're in the subway and there's all these people close to you and you're just like, like,
Right.
it's so totally just hit that breaking point. And so the false starts would have been like taking one yoga class and being exhausted by down dog and being like, I can't come back and do this.
Mhm.
And then, one time it was like, this is like a hysterical story, but I was like, it literally was like a girlfriend of mine. She was like, oh, come take this spin class with me. And I lived in Midtown East. It's on the Upper East Side. It's like 20 blocks north of me. And so not quite walkable, but I have to get on the subway. But where I'm going to get in the subway, they had closed down, like I think it was like Third Avenue or something, because Obama was coming through the city, and so they had completely shut down. Like, I couldn't get across the street to get into the subway to go uptown,
Yeah.
and so I was like, "Oh, sorry, Kelly, like, see you later, like, I'm not coming because, like," but inside being like, "Oh, thank God I don't have to go do that workout." And so, like, things like that, it was like the false starts were real. And I would say they happened throughout, from the time that I first moved to New York all the way up through, like, I remember getting a gym membership and never using it. It was like $80 a month.
Yeah.
And then being like, I've just spent $80 a month on this gym membership. And like, I don't even have $80 a month to spend on a gym membership. I'm a broke 20 something kid. Like, what the hell
Yeah.
am I doing? So many false starts. And
Mhm.
then the moment where it really like was I would say the day one where it clicked and where it was like, this is happening, I'm doing it. I remember walking home from work, and as I'm walking, I can see the exact moment and place in my mind. Like, I'm on Third Avenue and I'm approaching a Staples, and my apartment's like 3 blocks ahead of that. And I just, as I'm walking towards the Staples, I just get this like super strong voice that's like, buy a journal, buy a journal, like, buy a journal. And so I'm like, all right, I guess I'm buying a journal. So I go into Staples, I buy a journal, I buy a pack of colored pens, and I go home and I'm like, okay, now what? Like,
Mhm.
now what? Like, what is this? And the first thing I wrote on that very first page was, life begins at the edge of your comfort zone. And I just like was like, all right, I'm all in on this. Like, I have been comfortable to the place where it is killing me.
Mhm.
And I need to break out of that and do something totally different. And from there on, it was like not long after that was actually when I reconnected with Row House. I took it was on this is actually really timely. This is a cool story. So it was on Valentine's Day of like
Hey.
2014 or 2015. And right now it's February 16th. So it's like we're basically at Valentine's Day. And I had taken one or two classes there, still kind of in that false start place. They sent an email, hey, we have a half marathon row on Valentine's Day, $50, sign up here.
Woo.
And I literally was like, I have to do this. All right, take my money. Like, like I was like, if somebody told me that I would pay you to sit on an erg and do a half marathon row, you'd be out of your mind. But it was one of those moments of like raw, real grit within myself that I was like, I'm gonna do this.
Mhm.
And I'm gonna put my money where my mouth is, and I'm changing. And so I signed up for that, didn't train at all, showed up the day that it was time to do it,
Yeah.
sat down and said, all right, let's go. And I finished it, like, went through the whole thing, like, worked as hard as I could. I, finished about, like, few not, like, first, but, like, in the middle of the pack,
That's
and
awesome.
yeah, totally, and I'm like, I'm so out of shape, I can't even believe I pulled that off. I literally am like, "Okay, there's still people rowing." I get up, I leave, I take a taxi home, and I'm like, "What the hell just happened?" Like, one of those, like, you can't walk for days after it because
Yeah.
it's just so jarring to my system, and that was really the first significant shift.
Mhm.
And from there on, I had proven to myself that, 1, I still had the mindset of an athlete, that I could totally do it, and then the next thing was that, like, my body was still capable no matter how much I had, disassociated from it, disconnected to it, like, not been treating it well, my body was still super capable. And so from there on out, it was like, all right, I'm in this thing and I'm changing. And
Mhm.
over the next like 2 to 3 years, I ended up shedding about 90 pounds, 95 pounds, and completely changing my life. And realizing that I'm like, wow, it's so difficult to be healthy and nobody knows how to do it. And I got to teach. I have to
Yeah.
teach this. Like, this is that important to me. This changed everything. I have to teach. And then it's all downhill from there, or all uphill from there.
So two things on that point. I was trying to think of a better word for false start because usually like if you see a false start, like you got to go back to the beginning. But I feel like every time you do try something, it either builds motivation or it just makes it easier next time to start. So I might just blurt out the word at some time when we're talking, but I'm gonna be working on that word.
Yeah. Well,
And
it's interesting
second
because as soon as you said false start, I was like, that's exactly what it felt like.
off,
That's it. That's what it felt like. It felt like that, like, "Oh, I tried, but I have to start over again."
mhm,
Or, "Oh, I tried, but I didn't get very far."
yeah.
"Oh, I tried, but I fell off immediately," And, like, yeah, it's like that felt super accurate for me.
Hey,
That felt super accurate.
we'll take it.
Mhm.
And then what was the quote again that you first wrote in the journal?
Life begins at the edge of your comfort zone.
Okay, so I think that's really important for people, like especially our age, because if we look at even like our parents, or their parent, well, let's go to their parents, so our grandparents. Life was not easy for anybody. They were just building.
Greatest generation.
Yeah, there was nothing
They
was.
went to war.
Yes.
They went
Nothing.
to war.
Yes. Nothing was super easy for him. Life wasn't easy for him. There wasn't an abundance of food. There wasn't even, like, I remember my grandma, like, there wasn't an abundance of, like, candy. So, like, the opportunity for life to be easy wasn't really there. So that, like, they didn't really need to push themselves to look for difficult things because that was just life. So then
Yeah,
we get to our parents where things start to get a little bit easier. We look at the health of Americans declining because our parents had to look out for difficult situations. And, like, for them, maybe their parents were a little hard on them. So they are going to bring up our generation, as you spoke before, a little soft. So our generation
yeah,
is even it's even harder to seek out hard things because life is not really throwing that much difficulty at us. So I think it's great that you have that quote in there because that's in reality what we need to do. If we lived in, like, a third world country, we wouldn't have to be like, oh, like, I'm gonna have to look at my calories because that's not a luxury that a
yeah,
lot of people have, and it's very interesting. Um, that, like, a big issue in America is too much food, and
yeah.
that is a luxury that we have. And if we were in a different circumstance, people would be looking at us like, too too much food is your problem, like that. That's what's going on, and
Totally. It's really
it.
interesting because I completely agree with all of that, and you look at what happens in society as a result of trying to make things easier, right? Because, like, after the Great Depression and then in through World War I and World War II, like, people are that generation, they had to work so hard, but that's also when, like, the industrial boom starts to
Mhm,
happen, right? And, like, the if you look at I think about this because I always extrapolate. I like to think about it, like, over time and extrapolate out of, like, how did we get here? And if you look at the curve of technology alongside of the curve of obesity, well, to me, it becomes really clear that as we've gotten more technologically advanced, that we have gotten fatter, at
mhm,
least in America. And the thing is that why is that happening? Well, because we are creating, like, industrialized food versus local growing and working with farms, right? And even, like, technologies, like, that I don't agree with, like, like Roundup and glyphosate and, like, pesticides, right? Like, that allowed us to overproduce the food. And then we look at where people were able to the level of convenience has gone up with more technologies, cars, right? Like, that's even something we look back even a little bit earlier is, like, when people started using cars, they no longer had to walk as much, right? When people stopped doing manual labor for work, they start going to office jobs. Okay, they're less sunlight, they're less physical, like, they don't have um the same hardworking thing that builds a strong vital human of, being out in the field or doing all the work of, or even just being, like, cooking from scratch. Like, that's an art that has completely just, like, moved out of our society. Why? Because fast foods and restaurants and Uber Eats and just at a click of a finger, right? Microwaves, like, things like that. Like, as society has gotten more convenient, like, our health has gone down.
mhm,
And even same thing with big pharma. Like, it's like as people have gotten more access to what are supposed to be these, drugs that fix the problem. They don't actually fix the problem. It's just, like, making it worse for people because they then compound and they need more versus going back to the basics that we know work, which is move your body, breathe well, like, get outside in the sun, like, make sure you're connected to eating real food and connected to the earth. Like, the more complicated that life got,
mhm,
which is also, like, more technologically advanced that life got, the more difficult it's been to
mhm,
be a healthy, thriving human being. And then because now the war for our attention is on. And so, like, these phones and these computers that we love so much, like, just distract us all the time from the things that, otherwise we would have been reading in books or otherwise been out in the field or out in on the porch with our friends and family. And, like, So as society has like over this like really like extended industrial revolution, technological revolution, we've seen like how much the human health has depleted because of it. And so like I'm such a big like I just feel like I was born in the wrong time, or like maybe I've reincarnated in this time to like remember a time from before, because I'm like, can we please just go back to like our hyper local communities? And can we please like keep the technology that helps us, but also minimize it? Like it's like, it's like I love the human experience. I love feeling good and being healthy and being connected to people. And if we can remember, more of us can remember what that feels like, we're all going to be in a much better place.
Yeah. Well, and I think it's tough because we're doing what our body is telling us to do is to make things easier. If
Yeah.
we're a caveman and we can either run and like chase down an animal, or we can use a spear, and then we get to the arrows, like we're not going to be like, oh well, I used to be able to run 25 miles in a day, and now I can only run 12. Let's go back to running a marathon, or exhausting these animals, because that's how I used to do it. But and that's why when I was younger and I'd look at people, and or myself, I was like, well, like, why are they not pushing themselves to do these things? But in general, human nature is to do what's easiest, because only the last maybe 100 years it hasn't been based off survival. Like
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
that's been the only thing. So when integrating something, like we're gonna have to let whoever know is you're gonna need either a lot of motivation, or we're gonna have to set you up a different way that's gonna be something small, or figure out that why, or that story, or whatever it is. But knowing that your body's going to fight you for the most part. Yeah, and maybe a couple months in, 6 months in, or whatever, you're gonna be like, "Oh my god, I feel so much better." But like, we're not getting you that drug right away. Like it's it's gonna take a little bit.
Yeah, it's like I was having this conversation with a friend of mine the other day about how like our bodies have not evolved. Like, so the evolution that happens through every generation and through the adaptation of our physiology to our environment, like we have our environment has outpaced our human technology.
Right.
And so like our nervous systems and our like exactly what you just said, this idea of like you don't we want to be comfortable, we want to be safe, and that's a good thing. And so the body's like, no, stay here, right? You're fed and you're relaxed. And, like, no, stay right here. This is safe and comfortable.
Are you still
And
watching Netflix? Yes.
yes, exactly. And so like that experience, it's like you're exactly right. Is like you realize what it was for me and what I've seen for clients that I've worked with and what I've seen within my friends, or just people when I listen to people who've made big changes in their life, it always I think comes in a way where there is a moment where it becomes obvious,
Mhm.
right? Where it's like this from if you wanna say it's from God, from source, if you wanna say it's just from your internal world, like, I think we all hit a point where we, like, boom, okay, brain's online, and there's a recognition that something needs to be different, and I think that that type of, like, like for me, it was like that walk to pick up the journal, which I didn't know was going to lead to so many other things in my life that were going to lead me to what I think now is my purpose and one of
Yeah.
my passions in life. And I had no idea that that moment was going to lead me there. And why is a journal significant? Well, now the work that I do in coaching is all about writing things down, getting clear on our words, and helping people talk themselves into what they want to do, right? Because we know, like, again, the body's going to be safe and comfortable over here. We've got to figure out how to change the internal dialogue, change the external dialogue, release some stuck stored emotions, and then push people into the path of like how they can enact and create change. And it's just like it's funny to me now, like not, it's just like, of course, that's what happened. Was that like this pivotal moment of my life includes writing down, hey, it's time to change, and then
Yeah.
it happening from there. And so a lot of the things I think where I just have seen this so many times, and like, people talk about hitting a rock bottom, or just like where they couldn't take it anymore. And that moment where they need to change, it's sometimes it's from your own choice and volition. Sometimes it's not so easy. Sometimes it's out of like pure pain, desperation. absolutely like have no other option. But that is how our biology is designed, that survival response.
Right.
And so it's so much of like is like I think that where people can be more successful in making these types of changes in their lives is realize that their mind is one thing and their biology is part of that thing, but
Mhm.
that it's your biology is wired in a certain way to elicit a certain response. Same thing when we were talking about young boys in school, like their
Right.
biology does not want them to sit there. That's not their mind. That's not their conscious mind. It's their physical body, their energy, like the way that body is designed to work. And so I think, I mean, this is where it gets a little like could be a little like dystopian is that like at some point in time the species is going to evolve in a way where either we are going to like merge with technology or those of us that recognize the humanness are going to like fight like hell to keep it. And so it's like to me like I'm seeing this kind of like split in
Yeah.
front of us and I don't want I know which side I'm on. And I don't want the split to happen, but
Yeah.
I just I'm, like, aware of the fact that, like, evolution may move us in that direction, and so, like, like, it's difficult to you have to fight to keep your humanness in
Mhm.
today's world and fight to keep your health and vitality, and
Yeah.
then once you overcome, like, those basic things, it becomes easy, but it's, like, it's just a matter of, like, getting over that initial hump of breaking out of what's quote, unquote, "normal"
Right.
in our comfortable
And
over
you were
world.
talking about the hitting rock bottom and then like the last opportunity, the last chance. I feel that 99% of people don't hit rock bottom until like in a very and not as till the end, or sometimes they don't even hit rock bottom because life is so easy, life is so accessible. We have so many options. If you are getting too overweight or mentally unhealthy or whatever the circumstances, so I've been trying to figure out because those people, the ones that don't hit rock bottom, they're gonna try a diet, they're gonna try a new gym, they're gonna try a new workout, and they might see a little bit of success, but generally those people aren't reaching out to coaches, they're not doing this, they're not doing that. So what do you see for the people not hitting rock bottom? How do you see it changing around for them?
Well, okay, how do I want to answer this? So I think that our minds are the way that there is so much um propaganda in the world, so much like incentive for you to stay fat, sick, and disconnected,
Mhm.
right? Like that for people to stay in that state, there's so much incentive for that. And I don't mean for them, I mean for um big food, big pharma in politics, right? Make people dependent on the system. You know, I I think that what ends up happening is that unfortunately, like you get to a point of susceptibility and your brain is so malleable and influenceable that when you continue to stay in a certain thought pattern and a certain world and a certain level of convenience and a certain level of standard of quality of life, that becomes the norm. And unfortunately, you don't you like, it's like people don't know any better. And then when their mind is being manipulated, their body is being poisoned by, garbage food and alcohol and, even tap water, right? Like things like that. Like we are going down this path of like our bodies are being attacked, our minds are being attacked, and our spirit is being attacked. And in a sense of like, and I don't, and maybe attacked is a strong word, but it's like manipulated,
Yeah.
and it takes work to recognize like, "Hey, I opt out of that." Like, I don't wanna watch ads for Arby's and Burger King because 'cause I'm not gonna eat there,
Mhm.
right? But, like, when that's your world and that's where you go to eat every day on the drive-through on the way home from work, and then you turn on the news, and then you scroll through Instagram and Twitter, and, like, you're curating a certain sphere of influence, that is designed to keep you there, it's very difficult to break out. And so that's why I think that like, using those tools this is why I'm so passionate about like podcasting and social media for people who are flying the flag of hey, there's something better
Right.
because it's accessible to all of us and it's going to require like these things for you to shift and change. But holding that torch for people and saying, "Hey, this is what's possible." I think that's the best use of my time and energy as far as like how I can shift and change that. But for people who are not ready to answer that call, like, I have to be unattached, and I just let them do what they're doing, but also recognize, like, their circumstances are most likely the thing that's keeping them there. And when somebody's ready to change, like, knowing that they have and they need so many impressions of it first. Like, I had to be invited to go to the yoga class or the spin class so many times before I said yes. And it's the same thing with those people. It's like they need to see another option. And that's why I like really encourage, like, for me, it's important to be that person for as many people as I can be by sharing my life online and sharing my life openly in real life and being that leader because I know how bad it feels. I know how bad it feels where they are,
Mhm.
and they don't realize how bad it feels where they are because they don't know how good they can feel on the other side.
Absolutely.
And so it's like you get stuck. You get so like when people say that they're stuck, they really freaking mean it. They really mean it because they can't see another possibility. They don't see another outcome. That level, that influence isn't strong enough. And so they've got to first work out of their existing story, their existing sphere of influence that is not supporting where they want to go, shift the environment, shift the intake, shift the mental, emotional, spiritual intake, physical intake, and start moving closer to the side where they can work with somebody, whether it's a coach or go down different programs or take a different course or do something that will push them there. And like recognizing that that takes time, like for me, I would say it took me, I mean, it's taken me a decade. It's taken me a decade to be able to sit here and confidently say this way from the time that I was at my rock bottom
Yeah.
and maybe even 5 years ago, rewind, that would have been, like, 2, 3 years into coaching. Even then, like, what I didn't understand everything I know now, and I knew that health was important. I didn't understand how much, how much of an uphill battle it is to be healthy in today's world. Like, that came later once I started seeing, I'm like, "Why can't you guys change?" To my clients. "What's going on here? Why don't you just get it?" And then realizing all of those environmental influences in their mental environment, their physical environment, their emotional environment, their spiritual environment, their financial environment, because that can impact a lot of it too. And so it's just like this, you get stuck in that story, you get stuck in that place because everyone around you is accepting that as what is. And, it's like baby steps to get to the other side,
So
but
how has
convicted.
your coaching changed from where it started to where it is now?
Oh, totally. I mean, radically different. So when I first started coaching, I was working with primarily like CrossFit athletes or people who were like high intensity training in like boutique fitness hit classes, things like that, teaching them about nutrition. And
Mhm,
the reason I chose those particular people and chose nutrition was because I realized through my own experience, hey, you guys aren't getting the results you want because you're too stressed out, you're not eating enough food or the right food, and you're literally just like beating yourself into the ground every day in your workout thinking that's what you need to do to get slimmer or to lean out or to build muscle. And so I was like, I need to teach these people the truth.
mhm.
and, and so I started teaching about nutrition and stress management and mindfulness because I realized that those were the things that really helped me shed the weight in the end, right? Like beating myself into the ground wasn't what was doing it. It was when I actually dialed back a little bit, focused on eating enough food, focused on lifting weights, focused on walking, reducing my stress, meditating, all of that. So like I'm going to teach that in coaching because that's been the biggest needle mover for me. And when I started doing that, I realized so much more of like, okay, well, changing somebody's mindset is really difficult and changing their behaviors is even more difficult. And it's not even about the thing that they're talking about to me here. It's about all this stuff from their life leading up to this. And it's about all of this work of figuring out who they are, being comfortable and confident in themselves. And um, the first big shift in my coaching was when I decided I wasn't going to work. I was only going to work with women. And that was a change that I made just purely on the fact that I realized that that's where my passion lied. I was like, I want to help women do this because I'm a woman. I understand this unique scenario of how to build a relationship with your body and to fuel it and to respect it and honor it and cherish it versus hate it and be at war with it and criticize it. So I started my first iteration of change was working specifically with women. And what I learned in that process was that there was so much more happening in the emotional landscape. And
Mhm.
not that it wasn't happening for men, it's just that men weren't having those conversations with me. It was, they weren't going to talk to the girl at the gym about who's teaching them about food, about the stuff that's really aching and paining them. So when I worked exclusively with women, I realized how much more emotional depth there was to what was going on, and I needed better tools of addressing that. So I started studying with Mark England through Enlifted, and then I started learning that method inside and out and realizing, wow, this is really like, yeah, the physical fitness stuff is cool. And like, obviously, like I mentioned earlier, like you can't get a health, I believe that it's difficult to build a healthy mind without having a healthy body. And that's what actually took me back to working in gyms.
Okay.
So it was like, okay, now that I get what's really going on here, I want to go work with people where they want to start, which is in the gym.
Mhm.
And I want to go to the gym and I want to subtly change their stories around fitness, slowly change their stories around food. I want to empower them in the gym. I want them to know how to do all the stuff I was teaching before, stress management, food intake, mindset, all of that. But I was like, but I want to hit them where they want to start. Because I've always loved that entry level client. Like I've
Yeah.
always loved that person who's like just wanting to make a change. And then I got burnt out by the gym environment again. And that's around the time, of COVID, and so I was working in New York City. I was managing the row house facility. We completely shut down, and that butted up against all of my values. I was like, "This is you're telling me you want people to get healthy, but you're doing it by isolating them, giving them shots, and telling them not to go outside? Okay, this is fucked." So I then, completely doubled back down on, I'm gonna do holistic lifestyle coaching, and I want to, work with more people that are doing that. And around that time, is when I started working with the Enlifted team for marketing and sales type things and growing that business. And I found so much fulfillment in that because I was surrounded by so many coaches and leaders who were doing what I wanted to do, that it became like, I don't need to coach. I'm going to help these guys do it because I can have such a stronger, ripple by training and working with coaches, teaching them the skills that I've learned along the way that have helped me facilitate better transformation in that physical, mental, emotional realm in a gym, in nutrition coaching, in some lifestyle coaching. I can train other coaches how to do that, and then, because this is a skill like I learned and I realized set me far apart from my peers. And I was like, oh my God, I need to get more people on this team. Like, and so it just continued from there. And then now the role that I'm in, like, really is like primarily leading and teaching coaches through the Get and Lifted podcast, which is my favorite thing that I get to do because I get to have conversations like this and be able to help people see the path of understanding, like, hey, like, you know, we we have to look at at a whole person. And so we do talk a lot about the language and story and mindset components. We still talk about, like, what, because I'm still like advancing my knowledge in health and holistic wellness, and what's really helping optimize my body and what ways I can, get even more juice out of it, right? Even more vitality from it. So talking with other leaders that are doing new and novel things. And, we're at this point now where, much like what we were talking about with education, like, I'm on a mission to re-educate people. I'm on a mission to support those that are re-educating people. And I believe that that is coaches that are out there that have, not the ones that went through years of medical school, not the ones that have been, like, indoctrinated by systems that think like it has to be a certain way, ones that have been disruptors, ones that have dared to do something different, ones that are getting real, true, honest results for people, and that are able to improve the lives of people on a real scale that is, outside of the traditional systems that I view as failing us, and just support as many people as I can through that podcast and through our coaching certification to like, break out of the fear of being different and be the leader and be this person in your community and be this person for your clients because they need you.
Yeah.
And we all need each other, and, like, the more voices in the conversation, the better.
Mhm.
It becomes such a huge ripple.
If there is a coach looking to get that certification, what would be like what would they be looking for in the course? I'd be like, hey, that's something that I would like to have.
Yeah, so, like, really the main thing that I think a lot of, if you're in the health and fitness realm, or you're teaching nutrition or teaching lifestyle habits and behaviors, like, you're coming up against these problems with your clients where you're hitting up against their story, all the excuses, all the reasons why they can't. They say they can do it in the session, and then the next session they didn't do any of it, implement it. They're emotional, they're struggling, they're lacking clarity, they're confused, they don't know which direction to go, and you're like over here pulling your hair out, like I've explained it so many times. That coach that then it makes you feel like I'm not a good enough coach because I can't change this person's mindset. And it's far simpler than that. So the process that we teach is a method of looking at people's words and stories and down regulating their nervous system by using their breath so that you can get more clarity and accuracy about exactly what needs to be implemented and what's in the way. So we work through that process of stories, teaching different things like language games and the deep dive into some of the emotional traumas that they may have experienced in their lives to help get clarity to create solid, clear, strong identity of the person who can change and get the outcome that they want. And so coaches that, it's like really for somebody who that you can do so much more for your clients. And
Mhm.
that there's more going on than sets and reps and calories and macros and sunlight. It's like there's more and there's a deeper level of support that you can do. And sometimes you're like thinking to yourself, like, damn, am I just gonna have to go be a therapist to help these people? Like, no, you don't need to be a therapist. You just need some better tools that will help shift their perspective and change. And I feel so like excited to bring that type of method to what I'm seeing as like the next generation of health coaching and fitness coaching and like lifestyle coaching because it will make your job infinitely easier and your clients will get way better results. It's what people really are like needing and wanting. And if like looking down paths with things like maybe like breath work or um like behavior change psychology and things along the lines of like maybe you are flirting with the idea of like going to get courses in therapy or just different ways of working with people's minds. This is the most like practical, applicable, clear way that I've found that just consistently gets results for people without going down all of those other paths. It's like very clean, very straightforward. And when you learn it, it equally transforms you as
Yeah,
a human because you will start to realize, "Oh my god, wow, like I'm creating this victim mentality and imposter syndrome in myself that I didn't even know. I had no clue." And then you have all the tools to unwind it and you realize, "Oh, this is what my clients are up against." And it becomes like a smoother, easier conversation
yeah,
from here on out.
absolutely. And then what was the name of the podcast again?
Get and lifted.
Getting lifted. Wonderful. So we'll wrap things up with the same two questions that everyone always gets. So what's your definition of health? Not necessarily the dictionary definition, but what is health to you?
Health to me is feeling good in my body, connecting with people that I love, being happy and like, in a sense of like my heart's beating, breath is moving in and out of my chest. I have like full capacity to move and utilize my body, my strength, and I can also sit calmly in a meditation and I can go through the whole range of human vitality.
Mhm. Love that. And then what's something from your life that that the listeners would be able to take away as a positive?
Mm. I'm gonna say the quote from my journal, life begins at the edge of your comfort zone, because that to me, what that the way that I see it and the way that I hear it is, I'm at the edge of what is comfortable and cushy and I'm about to step out.
Mm,
And what I might think is that the edge is scary or that the edge and the leap is not going to be, oh my God, it's going to be hard, different, challenging, scary, it's dark, when in reality outside that circle is like this beautiful rainbow of like magic that I could have never imagined be possible. And if I just take that one step out, it's like, wow, a whole new life begins out here. And so if that resonates, like take it with you and use it because it's something I come back to often and just remind myself to push my edges and to seek the magic on the other side.
awesome. Thanks so much for coming on the podcast.
Yeah, this has been really fun. Great conversation.
Thank you.